sometimes when people have epilepsy, they experience this phenomena they call an aura, which is an altered state of consciousness before the epileptic seizure hits. And they can be very strange, these auras. So I read a case study once about a guy who, his aura was that his hand was being possessed by devils from hell. And he could feel the possession move up his arm and into his shoulder, and once it hit his head, he'd have an epileptic seizure. And so then there was another case where this man, his aura was that his exact double had appeared behind him. But if he turned to look, then he'd have an epileptic seizure. But if he didn't turn to look, then he wouldn't. So these, brain disorders are very strange things, because they're, well, the system that is disordered is alive, and it's capable of any number of extraordinarily peculiar misbehaviors. Anyways, Dostoevsky's aura was a world-revealing aura. And so what Dostoevsky would experience was that the meaning of things got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and then just as he was on the verge of discovering the secret to everything, he'd have an epileptic seizure. But he said that the quality of experience during the aura was so high, so overpowering and so deep, that he would have traded all of his normal experience just to have had those experiences, and he had them repeatedly. And I really do believe that it was this broadening of his vision and concept by his epilepsy that transformed him, among other things. I mean, he went through some pretty damn rough experiences, because he was in prison with rapists and murderers for a long time in Siberia, even though he was kind of an aristocratic guy. I mean, he had a rough time of it. And I imagine that also broadened him tremendously, given that it didn't kill him. But I really do believe that the epileptic insight was key to his unsurpassed genius. And so, his aura, and other people do experience epileptic aura symptoms like that, by the way, and some people are so enamored of the aura that they won't take their anti-epilepsy medication because they don't want to forego the experience that precedes the aura, or the actual epileptic seizure. So, Dostoevsky's experiences, the awe element of the aura, is also relevant to what we're going to talk about today, because both Binswanger and Boss were very interested in how meaning revealed itself in the world. And they had opposing explanations. I actually think they're parallel explanations, but the meaning that Dostoevsky experienced is an amplification of the normal manner in which meaning reveals itself in the world. So, I mean, and people experience that sort of thing in various altered states of consciousness. Anyways, Binswanger and Boss, so they worked mostly in the 1950s, and as I said, they were very concerned about what had happened in World War II. And so Dostoevsky and Nietzsche had basically predicted that it was going to be nihilism or ideological totalitarianism, and that's basically exactly what happened. And by the time the 1930s appeared on the horizon, the Germans, who'd been, they'd gone through an absolutely brutal First World War, and then they went through hyperinflation of insane proportions. So in the 1920s, Germany underwent this partly because they had such heavy war debts to pay for World War I. The German inflation got to the point where it was literally upwards of 100 million marks to buy a loaf of bread. So they were taking wheelbarrows full of money to the grocery stores. What happened was their currency devalued to zero. And, that actually happens to economies more often than you might think. So the thing just hits zero, and that's that. And then it has to be rebooted, so to speak. So the war was dreadful, and hundreds of thousands of men were killed or brutalized. Then their economy just absolutely fell apart. And then, of course, at the same time, well, a little bit earlier, the revolution had taken place in Russia, right at the end of the First World War, and the communists had come to power, and the communists were agitating all over Europe and in North America, and their goal was to produce a communist revolution that was worldwide. And so the Germans were all shorted out that the communists were going to take over the country, which was a perfectly reasonable fear. And instead of that, what happened was that fascism arose, and fascism was a form of state totalitarianism. And I think the Germans were so desperate for order by that point and that's what the fascists basically offered them, at least in theory. Unfortunately, as it turned out, they offered them a little bit too much order, or maybe a lot too much order, and things went dreadfully south. But